At this time, Bihyung was at the Seoul Administrative Branch of the Bureau. It would soon be time for the Seoul Dome liberation scenario. All dokkaebis in the dome were busy trying to finish the scenario. Bihyung walked through the halls of the Bureau and saw newly hired low-grade dokkaebis moving along with the instructor. Newly born dokkaebis. They received basic education at the branch's education center, were assigned their own channels, and were reborn as streamers. Don't hesitate to intervene if the interest of the constellations fall. You can't directly intervene in a given main scenario, so use sub-scenarios to aggravate the conflicts between people or create a dangerous situation. Don't create situations where the constellations are annoyed by character conflicts. A good person is a good person, and a bad person is a bad person. Make sure the dichotomy is clear. This way the constellations can easily determine the objects of their anger. Always induce the incarnation to be in the middle of the event. However, keep an eye on the main incarnation and make the event move around the incarnation. It also shouldn't give off an artificial feeling. The instructors spoke these words, and the low-grade dokkaebis were busy taking notes. At one time, Bihyung had been one of them. He learned how to proceed with the scenario and was taught how to smile and talk. It couldn't be too strange or too cliché. Become a streamer who wasn't disturbed by the scenario progression. Are you remembering the old days? Bihyung turned and saw the advanced dokkaebi Baram, the chief of the Seoul branch. Bihyung was nervous and his expression changed. Baram stroked his beard and stared at the low-grade dokkaebis. It's a terrible sight. Every time it sounds refreshing to the constellations, but this is something learned from the dokkaebi's formal education. It's somewhat inappropriate for an advanced dokkaebi to say this. But I suppose it is you who made the guidelines. Bihyung swallowed down these words. Baram laughed bitterly. It can't be helped. These scenarios sell well. There might be exceptions. There should be. However, that exception is possible only because the ordinary scenarios are openly reviled. Some low-grade dokkaebis were gathered in front of the screens and watching the scenarios going on in the Seoul Dome. On the screen, the stories of the incarnations belonging to the biggest channel in the Seoul Dome were flowing. Bihyung's face became a bit hot. Then I will be forced to kill you. Yoo Jung-hyuk, no. Yoo Jung-hyuk and Lee Suk-young were confronting each other on the second floor of the Dark Castle. Damn! Why isn't coming out? It will come out. I just don't know when. On the other side, Kim Dokja and Han Soo-young were discussing an unknown story in the mechanical gateway array method. Bihyung was immersed in his thoughts. I warned him not to say information that would be filtered, damn it. The advanced dokkaebi Baram opened his mouth. Your channel is popular these days. Talk of your channel is everywhere in the Seoul branch, in particular, that incarnation. I also receive a lot of curses. That's good enough. In any case, it is raising curiosity. Do you know that you're the #1 dokkaebi respected by the low-grade dokkaebis these days? I want to know why you brought me here. It was language that could seem somewhat rude, but Bihyung had no other way. This would be a difficult situation if he didn't go back to his channel right now. Baram was silent and Bihyung once again spoke. I'm sorry, but it's entering the final phase of the 9th scenario. I have to go back to my channel. That's why I called you. Bihyung saw Baram's serious expression and realized something had gone wrong. There was a loud noise from the screen and the full-fledged battle began. The incarnations with strong sponsors were fighting, raising synchronization in a reckless manner. Signs of a probability storm appeared all over the place. If such strong signs continued, the outer gods would gain the right to intervene. If so, Kim Dokja's safety could not be guaranteed. The anxious Bihyung tried to leave this place when Baram spoke in a cold voice. The constellations don't want your intervention. Currently, Bihyung's channel was the most influential one in the Seoul Dome. The fact that Bihyung was clearly being kept in the Seoul branch made something obvious. Since when has the Seoul branch been watched by the constellations? I'm always watching. I just don't look at the education of the low-grade dokkaebis. Isn't this what it looks like on the surface? The main scenario policy, a large number of nebula have complaints about this scenario. A large number of nebula? Bihyung knew who they were right away. Olympus, Vetus, Papyrus. The nebula with influence in the star stream were interfering with the progress of this scenario. Why? In fact, Bihyung knew why. It's because of that incarnation. Kim Dokja didn't know anything and was still struggling against the mechanical gateway array method with Han Soo-young. At most, he's one incarnation. He can't influence the entire scenario, Bihyung refuted. Only one incarnation? Do you really think so? No, he isn't an incarnation anymore. Before the 10th scenario arrived, an incarnation with no sponsor became a constellation. This was impossible considering the difficulty of the scenario. He will be a monster. Have you forgotten about the Goryeu's first sword incident? It is difficult to see such a non-standard existence again. Goryeu's first sword, cheok jungyung, the strongest on the Korean peninsula and among the upper-grade constellations, caused an incident. Bihyung also knew about what happened at the time. A person who incited many grudges because his natural talent didn't fit the balance of the scenario. A great deal of probability was consumed to exclude him from the scenario, only for him to return as a constellation. Goryeu's first sword is a special case. Kim Dokja became a constellation faster than him, but Kim Dokja's potential itself isn't high. If it's potential, the incarnation Jungyung has already reached transcendence. I know, that isn't too serious. In fact, Jungyung is the one who's more similar to Goryeu's first sword. That's why Kim Dokja is more dangerous. The frustrated Bihyung shouted, I can't understand some of the complaints of the constellations. Kim Dokja didn't enter under them, so they're annoyed. However, isn't there a situation where they've already taken action? Have there been any cases where fate is used before the 10th scenario? You're defending the incarnation. It isn't defending. I'm talking about an unfair treatment in the scenario. I don't think you're in a position to say that. Bihyung was surprised, but pretended to be calm. The advanced Dokkaebi Baram smiled. It's fine. I didn't call you here to catch your transgressions. It sounded like a threat where he intended to catch Bihyung's transgressions. Bihyung asked, Then why? If you're smart, then you would know. Haven't you ever thought it was strange? Why are the constellations already using the excessive action that is fate? In most cases, they can peek at the future through their dealings with prophets who can use future sight without using fate. If they anticipate how the target will behave, they can change the future with a moderate amount of probability. Yet they didn't do that this time. Why? It was something Bihyung had never thought about before. The power to force fate also placed a heavy burden on the nebula. There were many powerful incarnations apart from Kim Dokja. Why did they force fate over Kim Dokja? Don't tell me. If the nebula called for fate, it meant they had no choice but to use fate. In other words, the senior Dokkaebi Baram nodded. It means that no one in the star stream can see the future of constellation Kim Dokja. How can that be? I don't know either. One thing is for sure, many constellations are afraid that Kim Dokja will reach. However, it's still being filtered, so it is all for the end. Baram's gaze was fixed on the screen. You need to do this. Once it is over, I will recommend you to be an advanced Dokkaebi. It required a screening process to become an advanced Dokkaebi. Bihyung already guessed what Baram would do. Bihyung watched the screen and unknowingly hugged the egg. Hey, do a good job. I know. Perhaps it was due to the former Black Flame Dragon incident, but the atmosphere with Han Soo-young had become a bit subtle. Han Soo-young's constant trying to start an argument was probably because she was aware of this awkwardness. The constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon is smiling with satisfaction. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire hates this atmosphere. It took much longer than I thought to digest the power of cheok jungyung. 4 hours had already passed. I was sweating just controlling the power of his story. My mother had probably met Jungyung by now. Han Soo-young was sitting on the floor, eating mugwort. Then she said, By the way, I don't think your mother's a bad person. Did your mind become strange after eating some grass? Well, the two of you seem to have a bad relationship. I don't intend to meddle with someone's family affairs. But in any case, she's taking care of her child. How is this taking care? There are many parents in the world who have no interest in their children. Han Soo-young's voice took a darker tone. I sighed and replied to her, My mother spoke to me about you. She thought I was dating you. Han Soo-young laughed. Your mother has an eye for females. By the way, she thinks Yu Sang-ashi is better than you. So when are you going to kill that auntie? We laughed. Once again, I realized how certain Han Soo-young was. She was more like a character than anybody else these days. Han Soo-young stopped laughing. We sound like characters. It was as if she read my mind. My heart started pounding. Han Soo-young didn't know it, but one day she would become a character. It was just like Lee Sung-kook and Jung Min-sob. I liked both characters and non-characters, so I didn't know if it was a good or a bad thing. Just, I felt unsure when I thought about that time. Why didn't I want this person to become a character? Something has changed? I looked down at my right hand after hearing Han Soo-young's words. The power of the story borrowed from Cheok Jungyung was finally stabilizing. I nodded. Be prepared. We're escaping. I controlled my strength and pulled out the Unbroken Faith. The moment I borrowed Cheok Jungyung's story, the trajectory of his life passed through my head like a panorama. Cutting 1,000 people with one sword. Cutting a great mountain with one sword. Separating the sea with 3 swords. It was Cheok Jungyung's 3-sword style. It was the name given to a person who never swung a sword more than 3 times towards a target. The status you can't afford has fallen onto your right arm. 100 Days seal started to instantly crack. It was the splendor of Cheok Jungyung. The imperfect seal made with just the 8-beaded bell could never restrain Cheok Jungyung's power. A real 100 Days seal would only take effect after gathering all 3 heavenly treasures. The explosive flow of the story has distorted the space of the mechanical gateway array method. The explosive flow of the story has broken the 100 Days seal. I poured the white pure star energy into the air. One sword cuts thousands. Like a meteor shower, the sword cut through the air and space split apart. The mechanical gateway array method and the seal. Everything was pointless before this overwhelming destruction. It was the sword technique of a genius training in the sword for tens of thousands of years, the most ideal cut for destruction. I couldn't see the true power, but I felt a sense of freedom that was just like when I reached 100 strength not long ago. This was the power of the stars. The illusionary space collapsed and reality started emerging. It was a completely crazy sword technique. I felt just as greedy as when I got Kyrgios's electrification. How good would I be if I could make this mine? Unfortunately, bookmark only applied to characters. Due to your status increase, the bookmark skill will be updated. A new feature has been enabled. Your understanding of the constellation Goryeo 4th sword has increased by a very slight amount.